Yes, please. Thank you, Hope.
Yeah.
So I'll introduce myself first. My name is Oumaima El Ghazali. I'm from Morocco, and I am a doctoral student at Mohammed V University, part of the Language, Culture, and Society doctoral program. I'm also working for the Peace Corps in Morocco as programming and training specialist, mainly in youth development sector and life skills of students, of youth. And I am an alumna of an exchange program funded by the US Department of State, the Kennedy Lugar Exchange and Study Program. And I was hosted by Youth for Understanding USA organization when I was in high school. And I lived in Virginia Beach. And later on, I joined the organization on a virtual exchange as a participant, and then as a facilitator on the virtual exchange for two successive seasons or semesters. All of this experience kind of inspired my academic career into trying to investigate how cultural, I'll call it competence at this stage, develops in in exchange students. And so I started again, and I came up across the cultural intelligence model. And I will be talking a little bit about my thesis or my doctoral dissertation with you on these slides. So what I'm investigating is the development of cultural intelligence of exchange students after one academic year through a structured exchange program. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so before I go on, I want to, define concepts because, cultural intelligence might not be something that is familiar with everyone. So I want to give a brief definition of what that is. So it's an individual's capability to detect, assimilate, reason. These three capacities are cognitive and happen in the mind, and then act on cultural cues appropriately in situations characterized by cultural diversity. So what the cultural intelligence model brings to the table that is novelty is the cognitive, individual cognitive capability it carries. And it said, it claims that when you have cultural intelligence, you can pretty much adjust in any intercultural context you are put in like virtually or even with anybody you discuss with or you go into a conversation with. So it came in to fill a gap of understanding why do people function effectively in intercultural contexts more than others, and it also bridges two disciplines together, psychology and cultural studies. Yeah, thank you, Hope. So I'll go ahead and break it down because it is built on the loci of intelligences, like the multiple intelligences models of study. And it is composed of four different main sub-factors. The cognitive culture intelligence, it's a person's understanding of how cultures are similar and different, and that requires the person to know about their own culture and the other person's culture. Like sociolinguistics, meaning the language, history, politics, the leadership, how the country rules, and also the values of cultural dimensions of that community and their own community and the other person's community to allow for that comparison to happen. Metacognitive aspect, the thinking about their thinking, how much they are aware and actually can detect and check the accuracy of what they're saying or how they interact with other people in cross-cultural situations. The motivational aspect, which has proven to be like a leading sub-factor and kind of a predictor of how cultural intelligence will be in the other factors, is the level of interest and persistence, confidence during in an intercultural context or in an intercultural interaction. And it kind of involves the intrinsic, extrinsic motivation of people and self-efficacy, the extent to which they actually believe that they can adjust well in that situation. And the behavioral CQ, as I mentioned before, like the cognitive, metacognitive, and motivational are all translated into action through the behavioral CQ. And it's the person's ability to adapt into that situation, either like their nonverbal behavior or their verbal behavior in terms of accent, tone, or facial. Cultural intelligence says, and the sub-factors of it. If we understand the factors, we'll understand more points as we go on. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is like, a sample interaction between a person from a culture A and a person from a culture B. A person with the culture intelligence would actually, these are the kind of questions that might happen in their mind, like, should I compliment their looks or should I shake their hands? Because it might have background knowledge that probably in that culture you should not really compliment the look, especially if it comes from like a superior or somebody like a director or a boss or something, and it might be considered as harassment in other places. So really the person needs to be careful. And with shaking hands, in some cultures opposite genders cannot shake hands, so it's good that the person actually uses these filters while engaging in cultural interactions, and that's what cultural intelligence is for or does. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I'll be sharing with you the questions of the study that I'm trying to answer. Just disclaimer, I have not yet started implementing, like I have not collected the data of the study yet, but I piloted it. So I'll be sharing some of the data of the piloting with you as well. So the first question is, I'm trying to see what are the CQ factors that have developed or like remained stable after 1 year of academic exchange, and also what are the variables that have contributed or hindered to this development. And when I talk about the variables here, I'm talking about antecedents of cultural intelligence. That would be the nationality of the person, how much they have traveled, how long they have traveled. And I'll be looking at other variables, but really depends on how many students answer. So I'll make sure that I have 50-50 before I compare between the variables. The second question is, I'm really interested is knowing the strategies and techniques exchange students use to develop their cultural intelligence during that exchange experience. And also the third one is going to be answered both through the literature review I'm reviewing, as well as through the questionnaire and survey. And need to know how can we make any exchange program, a fellowship or a virtual exchange better through cultural intelligence, and how we can, account for the gaps probably or the needs that need to be improved. All right, can we go to the next one, please? So the first method I'm using is it's a quantitative measure called the CQ scale, Cultural Intelligence Scale, that is provided. It was designed in 2007, and it is now adopted by the Cultural Intelligence Center, and people can actually go and take like a normal one for their own to know the cultural intelligence. But I think it is paid, but for a researcher, we do have permission to use it, to use a free researcher kind of grid. So there are different versions of the scale. There is a 10 question scale, there is a 20 question scale, there is an extended 37 scale. I'm using the 20 question scale. I'm working with teenagers 16 to 17 years old, so I want them to like be at peace while answering these questions, and if it takes longer, I'm afraid I'm going to lose them in the process. So it's basic, statements, and they will just have to rate them from 1 to 7. 1 is it's a Likert scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree, with neutral in the middle. So they're just, questions like this. For example, the motivational aspect, I am confident that I can socialize with locals in a culture that is unfamiliar to me. So it's a self-report. And also the metacognitive has 4 elements. The cognitive has 6 elements. Motivational and behaviorals both have 5 elements each. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so I'll be sharing with you like just a brief piloting results that I used with the Youth for Understanding last cohort. We were distracted by coronavirus because I was expecting to collect the data from July until they leave late June, beginning of July, and then some of them had to leave March. But it's still considered like a 10 months period. So what I did is collect the data pre and post. So I'm using the quasi-experimental design. And then I compared the results. So I used the pair t-test using SPSS software, and there was actually a significant difference in the 2 tests, meaning that the students' cultural intelligence has actually developed significantly. Another thing I wanted to share is that on this table, you could see that even results of the like in the pre-tests, both pre and you could still see that the kind of rated higher levels of cultural intelligence. I mean, it falls within the neutral spectrum, but not many choices were within the negative spectrum of cultural intelligence. So you could see that even the exchange students that apply to programs for exchange do start with high levels of cultural intelligence, which is a great thing. I mean, a lot of factors have a say in that. Even the motivational aspect to it that is a drive to this change could be one of the reasons. Can we go to the next slide, please? So on the I mean, don't let the slides scare you. It's full, but we're not going to read everything. So on the survey, I kind of like after each section of the Likert question scales, I kind of put one of the questions that is open-ended for students to reflect on. So for example, I asked them, can you give example you observed how American culture is different than your own? And you know, I love reading these answers. They kind of take me back in the past to and time in my exchange experience, kind of answer a lot of questions I had, which was actually the drive to why I actually put this, wanted to do this research so bad. So I'm not going to read all the answers, but I'm going to go through the last one from a Jordanian girl. She talked about how people are literal in the US, in her home country. People say things they don't actually mean, and that the language is much complicated and more twisted. So here she's talking about the cultural dimension of direct and indirect communication. A lot of metacognitive CQ answers I received are also like fall within that cultural dimensions, either comparing the individualistic and collectivist communities, or they're talking about universalism and relativism and things like that. So I was really glad to see that students are actually aware of these changes and can actually observe them. For the cognitive aspect, I asked about the different ways or techniques they use to learn about American culture, like to develop their knowledge. And thank you. So the different ways, you know, reading, talking to people, friends, host family, movies. I loved seeing that they observe family and friends, and this is a really good technique, like observing others. I also was very glad to see that some people learned or picked up knowledge from the Access Micro Scholarship Program. I am an alumna of Access Program, and I don't know if any of you familiar with the Access Program, and it's a micro scholarship program that is, you know, that selects students from developing countries to learn about American culture and language. And I was part of that. I did not even know that they had the program in Moldova, but I was happy to see that. Also, for the motivational aspect, I asked them if they could describe any moment where they felt motivated to do an activity, either with their hosting organization, or within the school, like tryouts for the club, tryouts for the team, attending events, attending activities. And the last, the behavioral question I asked, examples of situations where they had to change their tone of voice, facial expressions or gestures during a conversation to fit with that situation. And I love this answer, and I had to share it with you, is that, you know, he said, a lot of Americans smile with their teeth on pictures. A lot of Germans do not do that. And my host mom said I should do that as well. I still find myself smiling with my teeth on pictures after 10 years of coming back from America. And you know, I've never thought about it. So that answered my question. Yeah.
That's you hilarious.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, I love reading the answers. I love them. Like when I go through the questionnaire answers, I'm like, I'm trying not to be biased as a researcher, but sometimes, you know, I just love reading them. Yeah.
I mean, actually on our Zoom Hollywood Squares thing. That some people have their mouth open for their smile and some don't. So there you go. You do have a question. Actually, I should have asked you at the way beginning, and they were asking about the variables, if they traveled beforehand or if this was just for virtual exchange. Let's see, their nationality. I think you did touch on the nationality part.
Yes.
If the students were from multiple countries working together, or if they were, I don't think people all know what your organization is and how the projects are set up.
Okay.
So, because people are asking, are multiple countries going to the U.S. or are the U.S. students going to multiple countries? Or so, can you just explain how that organization projects work, virtual exchange?
Absolutely. So the program, like I'm interested in it's called the traditional homestay program. So it hosts students, high school students, to attend one year of high school in America, in the United States, live with an American host family, attend an American high school, and do community service and things like that. And they are hosted from all over the world. So I was a special case because I got a full scholarship, and it was my hosting organization as part of another program. But the host students also who are winners of a scholarship like me from countries with the Muslim population or after the 9/11 event. So it started as a reaction to that, to build peace and more build bridges of understanding. That's their logo. So yeah, so we host students from all over the world to live in America for one academic year. Right.
Okay, great. So should we move? Do you have another slide, or is this?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay.
I'll be very brief. I know that I spend a lot of time on losing internet. So the qualitative measure, I'm a big believer of mixed methods. You have your data, you have to always supplement it with some qualitative data. So I'm using interviews, and I kind of designed the 3H. I just put that together. I think it's cool. So the impact of the 3H's, meaning the host family, host high school, and host organization. I want to understand what's the part of each one of these in developing those 4 factors. And I also want to understand the motivational aspect. So what I'm using, I forgot not to put it here, is a plot, right? A plot here that says start of the exchange, end of exchange, positive, negative, and then I ask them to draw their exchange experience, and then we'll explain that plot, what worked, what did not work, and we'll see where the culture shock started, the honeymoon phase was, and then we'll talk a little bit about the motivation. Was their exchange experience their own idea, or was it their parents' idea, or was it because they got a scholarship? And I'll go ahead and discuss the 3H's, the host family, the host high school. And I broke it down into clubs, sports, activities, parties, excursions, based on my own experience of, what the different parts of it. The mentoring person, because I had to get a mentor from my high school to kind of supervise the activities that I do, because we were required to do community service hours. And host organization, of course, trainings that we were provided with during the exchange, and area representative support. We had a person called an area representative in our area who checks on us, and we have to talk to them whenever we're traveling, provide psychological support, and activities done with the organization. So that's pretty much what I'm trying to cover. I'm planning on piloting the interview next week, and we'll see how that goes. I think this is my last slide. Yep.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for listening and sticking with my internet. And I'll look forward to communicating with you more in the breakout sessions. Thank you.
And please put your email in the chat. And
absolutely.
If people have more questions, put your questions in the chat. And I have to say, this idea of the students, I'm assuming plot is the same as a graph. And so the students plotting a graph of their experience is an amazing visual for each student to consider. So I love that idea. Thank you.